A charity gets an FDA-approved drug for the first time ever. Failure is the main innovator for treating Alzheimer's disease, and the anti-vaxxers, they're coming from inside the house. It's still December 2025, and this is big drama in big pharma. What's up, nerds? If you're new here, welcome. I'm Matty C, and I'm here to dish out all of the juicy deets that's happening in the world of big pharma and drug discovery. We're talking legal battles. We're talking the most innovative therapeutics coming to the market. We're talking missionary. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, good to see you again, cutie. You probably know that pharma is messier now than it normally is, so it's really easy to be a hater. So for this week, I thought we'd start with something a little different. Start with something more positive. For the first time ever, a non-profit organization has received an FDA approval for a gene therapy. Not a big bad chum bucket looking ass pharma company, a literal charity. Fondazione Telethon is the Italian non-profit organization in question. They reported that just a single dose of their stem cell therapy reduced symptoms of a genetic disorder by up to 93%. Along with their unprecedented efficacy, there is a few different reasons why their drug got FDA approved and why them being a charity is so important. But first, let's talk about the disease. Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome, or WAS, is an extremely rare X chromosome linked disease that negatively affects immune function and platelet count. It only affects around 1 in 250,000 people worldwide. But patients with WAS have recurring infections, eczema, and episodes of excessive bleeding. It also increases the risk of a variety of other autoimmune diseases, as well as lymphoma. There's no actual cures as of yet. The only treatment options are either to get a stem cell transplant, which takes forever to find an acceptable donor, or to settle for something that just manages symptoms. La Fondazione's treatment offers the first potential cure, and the technology they're using is really exciting because it's in this sweet spot of innovative yet familiar. Let me explain. Wiskira, the brand name of their treatment, is an autologous ex vivo hematopoietic stem cell therapy. Put simply, hematopoietic stem cells, the ones that eventually differentiate into different immune cells, are extracted from the patient. Once outside the body, a lentivirus is engineered to edit specific DNA bases on those stem cells, thus correcting the genetic irregularity that causes Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. Now carrying a gene that codes for fully functional WAS proteins, the stem cells are injected back into their original patient, ready to become fully functional immune cells. It's the genetic equivalent of sending out your laptop to be fixed by the Geek Squad. In this case, the original stem cells are the fried hard drive, the edited stem cells are the new usable hard drive, and the lentivirus is the geek with really nimble fingers. Now, this technology isn't brand new, right? There are other ex vivo stem cell therapies that are FDA approved, but not all of them have clinical efficacy like this. Reported across 2 different studies, there were 27 WAS patients that were given a single dose of their Wiskira edited stem cells. In the 6 to 18 months post-treatment, severe infections were reduced by 93%. But incredibly, the moderate bleeding events that are typical of WAS were reduced by 60% and held there for 4 years. A single dose of Wiskira, 4 years of efficacy. Seriously, that is truly impressive stuff. The fact that this comes from a nonprofit is even more impressive. Making treatments like this and doing studies like this are incredibly expensive. Current ex vivo gene therapies cost up to $2.2 million, or around 1.5 million pounds per dose. And typically only big pharma has this kind of money to spend. Yet ironically, they hate spending this money on treatments for rare diseases because the patient populations are too small to accurately determine whether this drug is effective or not. And there are too few people to profit from. Even La Fondazione's CEO, Ilaria Villa, reveled in their charityness. She called it an extraordinary achievement that confirms the value of a patient-centered model that turns research into real treatments, especially where the market fails to act. So how did a non-profit, a charity of all people, come up with this kind of money? Let's just say they had to put in a call to their pals at the FDA. Ask them to be a little more flexible. Vinay Prasad, the head of the FDA division that approves biologics, made it a little easier for La Fondazione to get approval. He did so by exercising flexibility in the regulatory approach to facilitate the advancement of life-changing treatments while ensuring scientific requirements were satisfied. Specifically, he did this by allowing the use of relevant manufacturing and quality data in the drug's application from a similar approved product, claiming the manufacturing process was adequately representative of Wiskira. So if I'm understanding this right, the FDA sat down with La Fondazione, had some gabagool, and said forget about it to a lot of the necessary manufacturing controls? That seems funny.
Funny how? I mean, funny like I'm a clown, I amuse you?
Sorry, putting the skepticism aside, trying to stay positive. So here are my overall thoughts on the whole thing. Innovations for rare diseases, like WAS, need to be de-risked. Otherwise, no one will want to make these treatments for these people. Using faster approval processes can be good, especially when the preliminary data is this obviously good. And if approvals are consistently given to other treatments that look this obviously good.
12 seconds later.
Okay, screw the positivity. The negativity is too juicy not to talk about. This story is not all sunshines and rainbows, all right? It's like an onion. It has layers. A lot of experts really don't like the way the FDA has been moving. They have been wildly inconsistent with what that process looks like to get certain drugs approved. As of right now, it seems like they're only giving these extra easy approvals to their paisans. Remember this quote from like a minute ago where Dr. Prasad hyped himself up for approving life-saving treatments faster with science? Well, he seemed to conveniently forget that when he denied Unicure from providing a first ever approval for Huntington's disease, despite very impressive clinical data based on a protocol that the FDA greenlit months prior. Or just last week when he arbitrarily said he'd put more guidelines on CAR T therapies. These are basically the same technology as Wiskyra, but they're used on T cells instead of stem cells, and they're used to treat cancer instead of WAS. Like that last example is incredibly funny.
Funny like I'm a clown.
Vinay Prasad is requiring that investigational CAR T cell therapies have evidence that should demonstrate superiority compared with control. Like most other clinical trials, he wants the new investigational treatment to be better than the old standard of treatment. The two trials that Vinay Prasad gave this Wiskyra approval for were based on open-label, single-arm trials. Open-label meaning that every patient and doctor knew what they were getting. Single-arm meaning that they all got Wiskyra. Nobody got a placebo, nobody got a control. And this soon. He's okay with this for Wiskyra, but is demanding massive randomized control trials against a placebo for CAR T therapies? That's the kind of double standard that has Prasad begging to go out back with Polly. And experts are definitely taking notice. Some saying that the system that's being run now is kind of based on exceptionalism, and the rules are completely arbitrary. Most frighteningly, for me anyways, is that one of the most trusted FDA advisors, one who created many data-driven programs to make approvals easier, make approvals faster, raised concerns about the legality of the current loosey-goosey approval processes. Now, I think we can all agree that, in theory, getting good, life-saving medication to patients faster is good. We can also agree that you have to try and stay diligent. You do need some exceptions, but not everything can be an exception. Because if everything's an exception, then anything can fall through the cracks. It also makes things ethically very muddy. Why should this guy get to choose whether certain treatments get approved faster than others based almost exclusively on vibes? Would you want a potential treatment for one of your loved ones to be arbitrarily axed? If you have a strong opinion either way on how the FDA should be conducting their approvals, I'd love to read them in a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Now, if that story or any of my other videos haven't made it abundantly clear that the FDA is absolute clusterballs right now, this one should do the trick. But it's genuinely embarrassing for them, so we'll keep this short at a nice minute Matty, where we'll keep all the details to a minute or less. The FDA is planning to add a black box warning for COVID-19 vaccines by the end of 2025. This is their highest level of box warning as it alerts the public to the serious risks associated with a drug. Such warnings are currently on products like opioids for addiction, things that have been researched for quite a long time. And guess who's behind the COVID-19 warnings? Our friend Vinay Prasad and his trusty sidekick, Tracy Beth Hogue, who recently claimed that at least 10 child deaths were directly caused by the COVID vaccine, citing a reporting system that practically spits in the face of the scientific method. Luckily, the actual scientists are fighting back. More than a dozen former FDA and CDC leaders have publicly slammed Prasad and Hogue's label, claiming it's irresponsible and unprofessional. Shortly after this, the CDC, which also doesn't have a great rap these days, highlighted that COVID vaccines reduce severe hospitalizations in children under the age of 4 by 76%. Compared to non-vaccinated children. So maybe the kids and our sanity might be all right after all. No news yet on how this will all shake down or any of the specifics of this label, so be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the updates as they roll in. Now that the negativity is out of the way, we're going to go back to our roots, back to the beginning of the video. Talking about Tony Soprano? No, we're not talking about Tony Soprano. About being positive. Johnson & Johnson's positinimab recently failed to slow the progression of Alzheimer's disease. a disease that has shut down almost every promising drug in the last 40 years. But Japanese pharma company Eisai is doubling down on these treatments and staying just as positive as before. Here's why. This figure here outlines the many different pathways that likely cause Alzheimer's disease. But over the last 40 plus years, the vast majority of drugs have been designed to regulate the expression of one of these two targets, amyloid beta and tau proteins, both of which reduce neuronal signal transduction, prevent normal brain cell function, and lead to eventual neuronal death. They are major players in how Alzheimer's disease, a neurodegenerative disease hallmarked by a loss of cognition and memory, worsens over time. But Eisai is doubling down. Their chief clinical officer claims that even though we know tau proteins cause Alzheimer's, people still aren't focusing on how they become so dangerous. In their opinion, stopping tau formation at the point that they seed, where they begin to form, is the most important part of preventing Alzheimer's disease. And despite the many setbacks in tau-targeting therapies, many other companies like Bristol Myers Squibb and Merck agree with him that tau is a better target than amyloid beta. And what he claims is because it builds up over time, while amyloid beta levels are about the same in people with or without cognitive impairment. Stuff like this is my favorite part of the scientific method. You know, one person, one company might do a trial for a certain type of treatment, they fail, and then another company gets to say, oh, okay, so that's why it didn't work. Let's try something just a little bit different, or something completely different. For example, the co-founder and chief science officer at the Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation thinks that anti-tau treatments ain't shit, and that targeting neuroinflammation is the next big thing, which is kind of ironic because Novo Nordisk just failed a trial on that target last week. You can check out last week's video on that for more details. I feel it sums up the scene really well. While 5 years ago, 70% of clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease were targeting amyloid and tau. And today, 70 to 75% of targets are novel. So for me, this story highlights a few interesting things about Big Pharma. As we already mentioned, it's a great example of the scientific method. Data-driven failures by some are seen as great opportunities by others. It also shows that scientists are stubborn as hell for being able to study the same disease for the last 40 years, even though treatments keep failing. Which I love because the goal is to create a treatment, in this case to give people more time to make memories with their loved ones. Finally, it addresses people who think that Big Pharma and scientists are all indoctrinated, because this story is a clear example against that. In fact, most therapeutics are developed this way, most science is progressed this way, where it's really just two nerds scrapping it out in a stinky room full of their peers at a conference. Will there be a cure for Alzheimer's disease soon? I don't know. But clearly there are people who are way smarter than me. We're working on it. As always, there was a whole lot more drama this week that I wasn't able to cover in detail, so we're gonna rifle them off in a quick Matty speed round. The FDA continued their anti-vax tirade by sending a note to Merck, Sanofi, and AstraZeneca saying that they'll be further investigating their RSV vaccines for children. Now, the FDA didn't actually specify what they were looking for or what the legal actions would be, to which the companies responded with something along the lines of, "Oh, I'm so scared." Novartis and Pfizer both made significant layoffs this week, cutting 550 and around 200 employees, respectively. Now, Novartis is moving the how, what, and where they're doing a lot of their drug manufacturing, so this type of restructure isn't super surprising, albeit very sad for the people who did get let go. But Pfizer's a different story, because they just bought a new company for $10 billion, signed a separate licensing agreement for almost $2 billion, yet claim that they need to cut costs by firing almost 2,000 employees since October 2023. Yeah, I see why people hate Big Pharma. Eli Lilly beat their own record as their new obesity drug, retatrutide, showed 29% weight loss in the preliminary data of their new phase 3 trial. Initial data also shows improvements in osteoarthritis. As someone who just got a new knee after LARPing as an athlete, I'm listening. And finally, the first ever approval using the FDA's controversial National Priority Voucher was just giving to an antibiotic called Augmentin XR. This voucher acts like a vibes-based fast pass to give FDA approval in less than 2 months. But like, Augmentin XR was first approved in 2002, and the HHS has yet to comment on what this voucher will let this drug do differently, while still bragging about how good the voucher was.
Okay.
If you're interested in reading more about any of those stories, or any of the other stories we've talked about today, the original articles will be linked down below. Don't forget to leave a comment on which story tickled your pickle the most, and subscribe so you're always up to speed on the future big drama in Big Pharma. But that's all for me today. Thanks for stopping by, and you stay classy, nerds.